Larry, if you're ready, can I ask you to start your presentation?
Certainly. Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are. Again, my name is Larry Wallendorff. I'm the Global Pre-Sales Manager for Corso. Before I joined Corso, I was with IBM Rational, and before that I was with Telelogic. So we're talking about Rational System Architect here, and it's been owned by several companies. But anyway, I've got some experience with the tool. Happy to be at Corso and happy to be doing this presentation. So thanks again, Simon. I appreciate it. Moving forward here, get my screen to move. There we go. So I've been introducing Corso here. I think most of you probably know who Corso is, but anyway, we are a premier IBM business partner for enterprise architecture. There are a lot of business partners for IBM, as you're probably well aware, but we focus on enterprise architecture and strategic planning. So within that, with the knowledge that we have around system architect and enterprise architecture, as Simon mentioned, we do have many of the people in the organization at Corso are members of the open group. We also stay in touch with all the major industry think tanks, Forrester, Gartner. So our mission is to address market gaps where we're hearing that those are coming out of the market, out of the open group especially, and other think tanks that are out there. We're trying to put together strategic planning solutions, enterprise architecture management solutions, and just trying to be innovative in the marketplace and using System Architect to do that by putting products that run on top of System Architect. So you can see that we've got a lot of experience around enterprise architecture and strategic planning. Martin Owen, the CEO of Corso, has been with the System Architect solution since the day it was written for the DoD back in the late 80s. So a long time, lots of experience with the tool, a lot of experience with the just enterprise architecture industry itself. So we do provide products, as I mentioned, that run on top of System Architect. We've got road mapping solutions, which we're going to go through one of those. We also have a ArchiMate solution and other solutions that you can find. There will be a page at the end where you can get in touch with us, and we can answer any questions, or you can see what are the products we have. We also are a cloud provider. We do hosting and SaaS, and we have consulting and training services. We're certified ArchiMate TOGAF practitioners, and we have a global presence. So enough about Corso. I'm going to go ahead and get into what we're going to talk about today. So this is an open group event, so I'm going to talk about TOGAF just a little bit, not a whole lot. I assume a lot of knowledge around the meeting this morning around TOGAF and ArchiMate. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And we'll talk about workspaces. If you're familiar with System Architect, you know that we use workspaces to partition architectures, and we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about the ArchiMate 2.0, 2.1 releases have come up with business motivation and implementation and migration modeling, and we're going to talk about that in the deck. We're going to stay framework neutral there, but anyway, we're going to talk about business motivation, driving implementation and migration, putting together work packages to model, step by step, how we're going to get from a current state through a transition state to another transition state, maybe all the way to that target state, which no one ever realizes, right? So work packages, timelines, and of course that involves costing. And we're also going to talk a little bit about how Corso has implemented a tool that we provide called the Method Wizard that makes it easy to do modeling, makes it faster, makes it quicker. Actually, what the Method Wizard does, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but the Method Wizard will you draw a line between two different objects, and there are lots of different relationship types that you might want to use there. You may want to use an indirect line. You may want to use a direct line using the right objects. And so that could introduce some complexity in doing models. So Corso has put a Method Wizard out there to help you through that and to pretty much automate that. We're also going to talk a little bit about how we've deployed Lifecycles to support this whole package. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get going here. So again, I promised to talk a little bit about TOGAF. You all have seen the crop circle there to the right. So doing enterprise architecture modeling, you want to model your strategy, you want to model your architecture down through the different domains so that when you get down to investment planning, you want to make sure that all of the projects, all of the investments that you're thinking about or that you have in flight, make sure that there's a direct line of sight from that project all the way back to some strategic initiative. All right, back to the mission statement, back to the vision statement, and from there you're going to decompose those strategic objectives. Make sure there is a direct line of sight from any project that you're investing in back to that line of sight so that you can justify it, so that you can get those stakeholders involved in your enterprise architecture program. They'll help you do the planning, and they'll help you make sure you execute to success. And it also means that if you have projects out there that you're investing in at the moment that are not aligned to any strategic initiative, that's something that's considered a gap in the architecture, something you should take care of. So anyway, modeling techniques, change is continuous. There are always ADMs, architecture development method iterations going on, and that's a good thing. That's what you want. So you're going to have multiple plans and programs or process, and the key deliverable is to understand what's the drivers, what's the migration and planning implications, what is the implementation and governance implications as all of these future states come together. The key deliverable is always an architecture blueprint. We're going to show you one way to look at that using System Architect, and how to transition, decide between blueprints. How do you make good decisions based on conflicting priorities? Okay, moving through this. This is a little bit about partitioning architectures using workspaces. System Architect has this capability, has had the capability of workspaces for some time. We're going to go through exactly what that looks like, but it is a way to partition your architectures. It's also so you can take your current state architecture, you can baseline that, and then you can put your target state architectures out there, 2 or 3 of them, and then that future state beyond that, and then so that you can work and develop and then do analysis within those target states or those transition states without impacting or affecting the current state. So they really are effective partitions, and they help you to manage architecture separately. And let's say that you're in transition 1, then you can take transition 1 and create sub-workspaces below transition state number 1, so that you may have an option 1, an option 2, and an option 3 of how you're going to meet the objectives for that particular transition state. And so then you can do the analysis. And let's say that we select option 2, then you throw out option 1 and 3, and you go forward with option 2 until deployment, and then that becomes the new current state, and you start over and keep going. So again, a workspace can be isolated for the purpose of a project, an entire architecture, or anything in between. And it's important to note that changes done within any particular workspace are done independently of the other workspaces until such time as you do a full deployment, and then you merge the transition state 1 back together with that current state so that you can create that new current state without losing anything. And so I think I've talked enough about what we can see here. The bottom bullet here gives you the perception that you can compare right before you do a deployment or at that go-live meeting where you want to analyze what are we going to, if we go live with this new architecture, what's the impact of change going to be? Are we going to get surprised? So we have a way to run a compare between that current state architecture and that target state architecture that you're about to deploy. Great governance technique that tells you exactly what's going to be changed if you go ahead and roll forward with that target state. So here's an example of a workspace pattern as best as we can do it in PowerPoint. So assume for a moment that Enterprise Architecture version 1.2 is our current state. We've been doing development and deployment, program timelines, business processes, all the different things that maybe we're starting an enterprise architecture program, and we have a couple of strategic initiatives that we want to use an architecture solution for. So we're going to bring those in and harvest that and build that out in this EA version 1.2, and then portray that and publish that out of our architecture solution. So then again, a compliance program is going to come along. And with that, we're going to take EA version 1.2 and create workspaces for X and Y. And again, we're going to consider which one of those alternatives is the right way to go forward. We're going to do costing around that. We're going to do architecture fit. We're going to talk to our stakeholders about what they think that the best solution is. We're going to do the impact of change around all of, so we're talking about applications, and we need to do impact to change around processes, services, capabilities, the information layer, the infrastructure layer, just to make sure we have a good grip on what's going on. If we're going to take these applications and migrate them to modify them, or we're going to adopt some emerging technology, we're going to figure all that out within these two workspaces, and we're going to pick one and we're going to go forward. So then we selected option Y, and that we have implemented that. So now we have a new baseline. Enterprise Architecture version 1.3 is the new current state. And say an outsourcing initiative comes along, and so we know we have one program who's going to go off in Workspace A there, Partition A, and another program is in Partition B, and Partition B has a couple alternatives that they need to evaluate before they move forward. And at the same time, as you're building your architecture and harvesting into a solution, you're always collecting and incorporating feedback. The enterprise architecture programs are important, but that's not the only change that's going on within the IT environment. So as you're doing acquisitions, as you're changing your data centers, as you're doing whatever might be going on outside the architecture, you want to continue to harvest that. So at some point in your architecture maturity model, maybe 2 years or 3 years down the road, when you have a new project or a new idea, you can understand immediately what the current state is around that in terms of all of how it's going to impact all of the domain. That takes a while to get to, so to get there, you are doing projects, you are driving those, you are working with the PMOs to implement those projects that you're workspacing, but you're always collecting and incorporating feedback around the rest of the IT environment. So we're going to put that in the workspace, and we're going to bring all this together in the version 2.0. Then we're going to take on an acquisition, and then you can see how we've also mapped in here to the TOGAF, different states of TOGAF as is in 2B, proposal evaluation. So we're kind of mapping it to the ADM here. And then you can see how this all maps together within the crop circle. And so this is important to try to understand how we're driving ADM, how we're using that to keep our architecture current within the framework of TOGAF or ArchiMate, and ArchiMate to support TOGAF, and moving forward. Here's another scenario. So we started with EA version 1.3 from the last slide. We know that that's the current state. We have an outsourcing initiative. We have built a workspace for that, and a workspace for a workspace X, a workspace Y, and all these things are going to come together. As we're going through this, we're trying to evaluate whether alternative X or alternative Y is the right way to go. We can take and integrate to System Architect with a rational focal point, which allows us to do the costing and measure the architecture fit, make sure that everything is in alignment so that we can say, okay, this is a good opportunity. The risk is high, low, or medium, and if we have one that's high risk, then we want to consider how important that opportunity is, and we can use focal point to do that. Focal point is also a solution that allows you to bring your stakeholders in and have them give you an objective opinion as to whether they think Project A is more important than Project B, and so do it in kind of what we call a pairwise comparison as they go through the stack of projects and the impact of projects and making sure that those are aligned with strategic initiatives. That gets them involved in the architecture. They take ownership for the architecture plan, and then they support the architecture program. So that's very important. But anyway, that's what you're seeing the dollar sign thing there at the top is we're going to pick the right solution based on ROI, based on opportunity cost analysis, based on all the assessments and all the alignment to the strategic initiatives, and put together a roadmap and bring that back into System Architect at the program level, and then be able to publish that roadmap. It's going to roll up to the process layer, to the organization layer, to the capability layer, and we can publish roadmaps looking out of System Architect at all those different layers. So being able to put that capability roadmap and know that it's linked to an official program timeline is very important. We can put the technology roadmap out there. You're always looking at emerging technologies. So what is the roadmap for that? What are the project alignments? And again, back to that capability alignment that we're talking about. And at some point, we're going to release a Enterprise Architecture version 1.4. That will become the new current state, and we'll go forward. So I think, no, it's probably rolling around in your head as to what I'm talking about, but be happy to demonstrate this and answer questions around any of this. But using enterprise architecture workspaces to partition your architectures, as you can see, gives you kind of a team space or a organization space, whatever it needs to be, to help you work independently of the rest of the architecture. And again, I mentioned that we are taking a very clear focus on business motivation. Goals, drivers, and requirements can be modeled. Requirements can be at any level, and they can be mapped with specific requirement management tools. So we want to bring in the requirements from wherever they are break those down as they decompose and align those to projects and make sure that we are driving the right architecture. At the same time, as we have done a deployment, we can always look back and look at an application or a business service or a process and understand what were the requirements that took us to that state of that particular artifact. And if we're going to change artifacts in the database, which we're always doing, then we know what the drivers are, how the drivers come together. So here's a requirement, and it's going to cause us to, okay, we're going to implement mobile device capability. That's a capability. So we got to break that down into what does that mean in terms of services, processes, applications, and technology and infrastructure. So again, we can always tie these requirements. We know what the drivers are, and that's what the business motivation model will help us do. Okay. So driving requirements into models. And then there's the implementation and migration diagram. And this is, both of these diagram or viewpoints are straight out of ArchiMate 2.0. That's the whole point of ArchiMate 2.0 was those two models. So anyway, there's for the first time in the industry that I'm aware of, there is a way to model transition states of architectures over time. And so we are mapping. You see down here below the big block, 2012 architecture, Assurance architecture, and 2013 Assurance architecture. Those are workspaces and system architect. In terms of the implementation and migration viewpoint from ArchiMate, from the open group, those are plateaus. So we can map those plateaus directly to the workspaces and system architect, and I think that's a unique capability for our solution. So anyway, plateaus represent workspaces. The little object at the top of that diagram down there is a gap, and that tells you what's being changed between the two states of the architectures. Again, we can compare those two architectures to keep everyone informed as to what's going to change when that 2013 Assurance architecture is realized. And then we map that to deliverables that represent assets that are being modified or creating during work package or project life cycles. I don't know if we have any questions yet. But I'm going to go ahead to work packages here. Again, these represent discrete pieces of work at a given start and end time. Work packages can be at various levels, programs, projects, and tasks. And we've been able to, Corso has had a solution for road mapping work packages for quite a while. But we're coming up with a new release of that where we can, of course, create viewpoints for work packages and milestones. But we are also introducing a new package of our ArchiMate solution and our road mapping for TOGAF solution that also does milestones around capabilities, processes, organizations, applications, technologies, whatever. So all the different artifacts that are being changed by a project, we can show you the application timeline, the capability timeline, so on and so forth. So these are new releases that are coming out, and I wanted to show you that. So when I say timeline, what am I talking about? So a timeline, as you would assume, represents a road-mapped artifact. So something that's on a roadmap. It's going from its current state to some transition state. There's a program in place with a number of projects below that, and we're working on all the different layers of the architecture domains, all those artifacts in a coordinated manner going forward. And we want to make sure that we stay on track and we can relate those work packages one to another, creating dependencies so that we can really put together that program view of when we're going to get there and what's going to happen and what's going to be dependent. And so we have created a timeline view that shows milestones for projects and programs depicted in a little piece of the pie, and those pieces of pie, as you're going to see, will run across horizontally on a timeline, and they'll have different color on those little pieces of the pie to indicate and give you some kind of visualization of the state of that project at that milestone. So when you're going to have a milestone checkpoint, you're due, you're late, or your resources are too high or too low, or your costing is going over budget, or you're going to be delayed for some reason, you can indicate that visually with these milestones, little pieces of the pie there, and that's a very effective visualization for, again, a review. Segments of the pie chart depict domain values and can be modified and customized to be exactly what you need them to be. So looking at this, so here's a project roadmap that we've had for a while. And so looking at this, you can see the different projects within this program. And they're named over on the left, but you can see their timeline. These timelines are expandable or contractible. and they can be for one program or many programs. As you expand the timeline, of course, you're going to see more milestones, you're going to see more projects, and each one of these, so if we started out, if we look at the first one, with a prototype milestone there, and the colors are yellow, green, and red, and over time you can see those change to gray, green, and white, and so I can't go into exact detail of what those colors mean because that's customizable by you, the client. So, but anyway, you can, if you know what the milestone colors represent, then you can see the progress, you can see what's going on, and the green is usually a pretty good indicator. If you're red, that means probably something is negative, your cost overrun, your resources are, you don't have the resources you need, or there's some kind of problem. Okay, so again, this is important, this is critical. It's always been very important in the enterprise architecture industry to produce roadmaps, to produce timeline views, and there's been many attempts, but I think, as far as what I have seen, this is the best presentation that we have here. And so there's the project roadmap that's been out there for a while, but I'm going to show you some. So there's going to be processes involved in those projects. There's going to be applications involved, technologies, or you can present this at the organization level, the capability level, as I mentioned. And so you're going to be able to tie these together as parent-child models, or you can put them all in the same roadmap timeline. And some people will do that. It depends on your preference. Some people will say, okay, I want to see the project and I want to know what processes and what applications are being affected by that project. And then, so that can be a good viewpoint, maybe a parent diagram to more detail at the lower level, so you can break a program down into the projects in that program and have child diagrams below that for each project within a program, or use your imagination, whatever that you'd like this to be. And then, so here's the same thing at the application view. So here's an application roadmap, and this can take into effect, what are the emerging technologies that are out there. So we're going to take a look at our technologies. The technology roadmap is going to affect the application roadmap, and so you can create those viewpoints. Again, you can see the dependencies between these. So something needs to happen on the claims management project at the top. To provide claims education staff has to be completed before the next project below it can start. So those kind of dependencies can be visualized. You can click and open up something in System Architect to get the information behind that dependency. You can create reports. You can publish this. You can actually drill into the rest of the architecture to see what's going on. You can drill into the workspaces where these things are occurring, and maybe you see something on this roadmap up here, the process roadmap or the project roadmap. These might cross a couple of workspaces or a couple of transition states. So you can see that as well, and you can model that with that implementation and migration model that showed you. So going on down in here, the application roadmap is here, and here's the technology roadmap, and it just keeps going down into the details. So this is a very powerful viewpoint. Okay, so beyond that, we also have costing, actual cost, and budgeted cost built into the work packages, and it can also now be built into the other artifacts that are going along there. So again, what am I investing in these projects to get me from one state to the next? And when we go live, how are we going to take that project cost and that ongoing support cost and roll that out into the organizations that are using the application? That's all available, and that capability exists using System Architect and Focal Point together. Again, looking for a good enterprise architecture management solution is what we're talking about. And these costs can be imported from other applications such as Excel, or maybe you have a finance application that you're using to allocate project costs across the organizations, or however you do that. We can import that into System Architect very easily, and that's a very important capability to have. So you can also maintain it directly in System Architect if you'd like to. So there's costing. Again, I talked a little bit about the method wizard. You pick a couple objects on a diagram, and you draw what we call a magic line between those two objects, and then a dialog will pop up. The method wizard dialog will pop up. It knows the spec, ArchiMate or TOGAF, whatever it might be, and it comes back to you and presents you with the right relationship types to use, the right objects. If you need new objects on that diagram to use direct relationships from maybe the technology layer up into the business layer of the architecture, it'll tell you what those are, and if you click the right buttons, it'll draw them for you, automatically drawing the entire diagram out for you. And the ArchiMate deployment from Corso also uses complete representational consistency. And what I'm talking about there is when you do join two objects together in a relationship, the meta model is automatically updated on both ends of that relationship. So that means that you can draw out a diagram or a viewpoint, put that together, and that represents your current state, copy and paste that into another diagram that's of the same type, maybe in another workspace for the future state. And then you can go and use a matrix that represents, okay, here's a matrix that tells me these applications are mapped to these processes, and that's going to change in that future state. So you can change those by, opening up the matrix and clicking in the right boxes to put an X to represent the new relationships and take out the X where that relationship doesn't exist anymore, and go back and refresh that diagram, and it'll automatically redraw because of representational consistency. That's important to remember. So the method wizard actually guides you through creating a model, maintaining that model, keeping things in sync between current state, target state, maybe various target states. And we've done some benchmarking around this, and so people who are doing architecture without the method wizard and they take on the method wizard with the ArchiMate or TOGAF solution for road mapping, and they have a very powerful capability in benchmarking that. They're saving 10 to 20% of modeling time creation and maintenance going forward. So it's been a very successful capability that we've put into System Architect. Lifecycles, we've always had Lifecycles on the different projects, and now we have Lifecycles on all of the artifacts that might change. So applicable to modeling time for specific objects within a workspace. So show the lifecycle states of the applications and the lifecycle states of the technologies, and of course those are different lifecycle states. And we can also put lifecycle states against capabilities and reference models and standards. I mean, those things are important. People need to realize the reference models and architecture standards have a life cycle, and so we can portray that and we can model that, and that is an aid to the governance that's going on behind those. So we've got two states of life cycles that come out of the box. You can create your own. You can modify them. We have deployment and usage for life cycles. So the deployment is more from a project perspective, where usage is more from a user perspective. So there are different types of life cycles. As they come out of the box, you're going to see that they're named, the deployment life cycles are named birth, and then planning, and then implementation, production, and retired. Again, those can be whatever you want them to be. You want to make the tool match your methodology, not the other way around, and that's something that's very important to Corso and IBM. And so being able to help you map the model to your methodology is extremely important. I'm not saying the tool won't change your methodology, because it usually does, but again, we're going to start by trying to map the solution to your methodology, not the other way around. So there's deployment life cycles and how they come out of the box. And usage life cycles are where we're going to go out and we're going to take on an organization or a group of users. We're going to do the planning, training. We're going to make the new application available. We're going to decommission the other one. And at some point, every application goes into sunset, we hope, so that you can keep an active effort going within your methodology to make sure that every project is doing emerging technology and studying that, and every project that you are funding is doing the right amount of obsolescence and decommissioning. And then we can take and publish a roadmap as well. So once we've created those timeline models, we can go from there and generate a roadmap that looks like this. This is pet insurance roadmap, and it's very lightweight, but it does present the point that the pet insurance product is using a couple of applications down below, and we can map this at any level of the architecture. So you can see when the birth was, when the planning was for these two applications, when did it go live, and we were planning to have it be in production for a couple of years going forward, and then you can look into the retirement phase. And if we have the next layer of the replacement out here, then you can see on the same timeline the home and policy administration, or home and away policy administration goes away, and maybe we implement ERP and it takes forward that capability out there in 2020 or something like that. To be able to see this, we can publish this, and we can publish the roadmaps and different things using System Architect and Essay Publisher, and a very important component of the Essay suite is System Architect XT as a web interface into the architecture. that does it does dashboards for your executives. And it presents all the models and system architect. And it also has an interface for your subject matter experts that are outside of EA or IT that can come in and maintain a part of the architecture for you. So enough about that. So I'm about done here. I think I'm a little bit early, but I was shooting for 35 or 40 minutes, so maybe we're not so late. But anyway, you'll be able to download this recording, and we can get you the slides. And so anyway, you can take a look at the information we have here. We have an ongoing blog on road mapping that's becoming more and more popular all the time. And if you want to see other presentations on, well, not just road mapping, but road mapping and other presentations that we're doing, you can click on that second link there. And if you want to do an evaluation of ArchiMate on System Architect or the TOGAF road mapping plugin on System Architect, we can certainly provide that for you. We'll set you up on our cloud, walk you through the tutorial, and then you can go from there, adding your components in there and trying to see what this would look like in your environment. Okay, any questions at all? And with that, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the first slide so you can get my information, but I'm ready to take on any questions that you might have, Simon.
That's great. Many thanks for that, Larry. If anyone has any questions, can we just put them into the QA facility, and I'll work our way through that. Larry, we have had a few requests for a copy of these slides. Do you plan to make the slides available?
Yes, absolutely. I'll get those to you, or they can send me an email, whatever way they want to go about that.
Yeah, that's fine. So if anyone wants a copy of the slides, then you'll have my email, so I'll happily act as the go-between there. That's not a problem at all. Let me just have a look at some of the questions we have here. Yep. We've got a question here from Vicata. How many big data and cybersecurity projects have you done using ArchiMate and TOGAF?
How many big data? I'd have to do some research on that. We have been, of course, we're involved with IBM constantly. Corso is helping the IBM Business Transformation Office go through an enterprise architecture harvesting and what do they call it? They're trying to modernize their entire environment, so Corso is leading that project, and that's how we've got big data involved, but I'm sure there's other big data engagements that we are working on. If you send me an email or send Simon an email, I'll get that information for you.
That's great, thank you. Question here from Stephen. How does System Architect deal with the MOF?
You said the MOF?
MOF. Deal with the MOF. I
don't know what that means, what that stands for.
Okay, Stephen, if you can just clarify that, we'll take a look at that. Question here from Richard. It's quite a long one. I'll just read it out. The timelines appear to step into the project management, release management spaces. Please discuss the overlap between RSA and typical project management, portfolio management, release management tools, and he says, i.e. tool integration versus duplicate data entry.
Okay, so we're always looking for the right type of integration. So yes, you can start at a very rudimentary level, and you can export Excel from a tool like Microsoft Project and import that into System Architect. You need to keep in mind that the enterprise architecture solution does not need all of the data and information and all that might be in Microsoft Project, right? So in System Architect, you're looking at planning, you're looking at impact of change. So you don't really, I know some people will, it's totally up to you, but the recommendation is to bring in the project, to bring in the description, to bring in the scope, and bring in the timeline and call it good in the architecture. So that you're constantly relating back to the planning tool, for the release tool, Microsoft Project, or whatever it might be. You want to know when those are going to happen, because the message from the enterprise architecture practice is going to be when are these capabilities going to change? When are these processes going to change? What's changing them? What's the scope? What's the investment? So from an integration perspective, it's not a one-for-one. We go all the way from that to, I don't know if if you've been around IBM long enough to understand what OSLC is, but Open Service Lifecycle Collaboration is a solution that we are getting into more and more. If you go to openservices.net, I believe it is, or just go Google OSLC, there is a consortium out there of there's 200 companies out there that everyone is working on putting together a new technology that allows you to use web services to go from maybe a project and system architect to something in a web-based project planning tool or project release tool. And you don't ever move data between those two applications. You create a link from one side to the other side, and those applications can stay informed and in sync with up-to-the-minute current information on both sides of the integration. So OSLC is becoming a big movement so that you're not moving an artifact from one tool to another where it becomes stale and you have to remove it again to keep it current and keep that going. So we can start lower level. We can use Excel import, export. The middle level there is to use an API, and we have several different APIs that we can use, and we can put those on schedules to keep the tools in sync. We are constantly aware of what's going on in the CMDB space. Maybe it's the service repository, maybe it's the process modeling tool. Wherever you need to go to find artifacts that will help you represent current state within the context of a strategic initiative. So we're going to go out and put the right integration together to bring all that into the tool, modify that, roll out that future state, and when that future state goes live, we go back to those solutions for full deployment. So again, we're going to put together the right integration at the right state. So again, we're not going to copy, we're not going to take over. Sometimes it becomes the right thing to do to have system architects be the host for the application portfolios or the technology portfolio. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to do that. You can integrate the CMDB tools. You don't want to take everything out of there. That's a lot of information. So you want to keep that focused on what am I working on, what are my strategic initiatives. And so, again, you get the right integration with the right scope is very effective. I hope that answers your question. Next question.
That's great, Larry. Thank you. Question here from an Urban asking, what is the output of the road mapping tool?
So the output of the road mapping tool is a roadmap viewpoint and the project timeline that I showed you. So with those two things in mind, so you're going to get a viewpoint that looks like one of these, and we can export that to a viewpoint that looks like this, and we're also going to have all of the current state and future state models or viewpoints that have been built in System Architect to support this over time that are available through SA Publisher and System Architect XT. So there is a lot of output that you can get from this. It's more of a question of what do you need, because we'll take this roadmap viewpoint right here that I showed you, or take a roadmap that looks like that, and we can translate that into the capabilities because we have the relationships to tell us. We have the technologies related to the applications, related to the business services, all the way up to the capability, and by the time we get to the capability, so we can show you based on a timeline. We're not going to show the executives this roadmap. We're going to show them a capability roadmap for all the capabilities they care about, tailored to that. What do they want to see and what do they not want to see? And we can put that in System Architect XT so they can see it through a web interface that's up to the minute current. So it's a general answer for a specific question, but if you need more detail, I can certainly provide that.
Okay, thanks, Larry. We can go back to the MOF. I've got a clarification. That's Meta Object Facility. Does that help? How does System Architect deal with Meta Object Facility?
Okay, now that I know what that means, I'm still going to plead the fifth. I really don't have an answer for that, but if you can send me an email, I'll get you one. Okay, that's fine, Larry.
Question here from Si. Are those roadmaps validated from integrating with any measurements, metrics obtained from production setup?
Yes, they are. So you can, again, if you're familiar with System Architect, you can put whatever metrics you want to on the technology, the applications, the work packages, or whatever. And that's a very important question because you do have to consider what is the impact of change on your production line or on your customer-facing product line. Of course, you've got to take that into effect or into account, and System Architect and Focal Point both can deliver to that capability.
Okay, thank you. Robin asks, plateau comparisons, again, what is the best method?
So we have, System Architect has a tool that's always been there to compare. So in the old days, before we had Workspaces, and we're talking about 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago when we introduced Workspaces, we've always had a utility in System Architect called SA Compare. And SA Compare, you run that, and you can use it between two databases or 2 workspaces within the same database, and it'll come back and give you an HTML viewpoint web page that you can go through there, and you can say, I want to see what's, if you click on the All button in that viewpoint, which I had a picture of that here, if you click on the All view, it'll give you indications of a diagram, a list of diagrams of a specific type, and you can look in there and see if they have a green indicator, that means they didn't change. If they have a red indicator, that means they did change, so that you can validate that what you expected to change is going to change. Or you can click on Changed Objects Only, and that will give you the full list of just what changed in terms of diagrams, definitions, and properties, and so on. And so it's a very good project review technology. It's out of the box in System Architect. It's called SA Compare. So that's what we recommend. There are probably other ways to do diff, or it's a SQL Server database. So there are other utilities out there where you can get to the same types of information, but this is what we recommend.
Okay, question here from Mike Larry asking, what exactly does a portfolio comprise or consist of? And he says, say, within Rational System Architect.
So a portfolio can be, what does that portfolio look like in terms of your environment? So I would throw that question back to you. Typically an application portfolio or a services catalog is a list of services with attributes that you can publish on a report and put that out in System Architect XT or Publisher or a standalone HTML report. Typically they are confined to an object type, but they can be whatever you need them to be, whatever you want them. So what does that mean in your environment? Again, we want to make the tool fit your methodology, not the other way around. So what does the portfolio mean to you? And we get all flavors, trust me.
Okay, thank you. VCAS asked, can we customize the framework for specific architectural needs, for example, information architecture? And he goes on, which components should be utilized for enterprise information architecture?
So there's a couple questions there. And you may have to take this further, but let me take a shot at it for you. All the frameworks in System Architect can be modified. Or you can bring in your own framework or bring in a Gartner framework and have all those frameworks active at the same time if you want to do that. We've seen people take on TOGAF or ArchiMate and build an ITIL below that or above that, whichever perspective you like. So those kind of things happen all the time. People will have their own framework that they've IBM GBS or maybe Gartner has gone into some organization in a company somewhere and they've put together their own framework with their own maturity model, and we can bring that in and map that to map each cell of that framework to the artifacts and the matrices that it supports. That's easy to do. So in that term, whatever framework you have, however you want to modify the ArchiMate framework, you can do that within System Architect to meet your needs. The second half of that question, in information architecture, that again, it depends on what framework that you're using and what your requirements are. So again, we're going to make it map back to you. But if you're using TOGAF has a stronger presentation of information architecture than ArchiMate does, in my opinion. But that doesn't mean that you can't use ArchiMate to present the information architecture. You certainly can. And those two are coming together, and over time, there'll be a better, it's just going to get better and better. For me to tell you what kind of information objects that you should put in your framework, again, that totally is that we have to have a discussion around, what are your objectives in that space, what are you looking for, and we can put together, System Architect has always had the ability to do a logical and physical data model and even a conceptual data model if you turn on the IDEF solution. So again, that's what I'm talking about. We can make this work for you.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Kenneth asks, in your experience, about how long does it take an organization to convert its current enterprise architecture strategy and plans into something like this tool? And he goes on, assuming the organization is somewhat immature with TOGAF and best practices.
The smartest thing that I can recommend that you do is adopt an enterprise architecture maturity model, and there's a lot of them out there. So again, it would be a conversation on helping me understand or helping us understand where you're at in terms of your enterprise architecture practice and the maturity level that you have, and we could help you either tailor a model or go get one off from the industry. There's billions of them out there. The Federal Enterprise Architecture Maturity Model is one that I think is very good. And it's widely used, probably the most popular one that I'm aware of in the commercial space, where you take in level one, as you're talking about, creating your inventories in a solution like System Architect, putting something in, taking some kind of relational database tool and creating your inventories. And then that's level one. And then you get more and more focused and integrated into the planning cycles of the entire organization until level 5 is a representation of you are either driving or you are a key component of the strategic planning methodology lifecycle. You are invited to that meeting or you're driving that meeting from an enterprise. The enterprise architecture program is seen as a key partner. That's level 5. And so how long does it take you to get from 1 to 5 is something that this maturity model will help you set the expectations and set the different levels of detail. So you're going to define what is level 1. Are you going to follow the FDA model and call that do my inventories and my catalogs and become what they call aware, like the industry or the enterprise aware of the enterprise architecture practice and what they have and what they're doing. Level 2 is you start to take on a couple of 2 or 3 or 9 or 10 strategic initiatives, whatever it might be. Level 3 is you're starting to get broad acceptance, where all the divisions of your company, some percentage of those have adopted the enterprise architecture. They're working with you. Some of them may not be. And then in level 4, you're finally really very close to having full enterprise-wide coverage. Level 5, you're part of that strategic planning methodology and practice. I don't know if I answered the entire question there, but that's how it, and how long does that take? It depends on where you're at. If you're just starting out, if you're not using a tool. Simon would be a better resource for this. They've done the analysis with the Open Group. So is Gartner. If you're not using a tool, it's going to take you 6, 7, 8 years, depending on your enterprise and how big it is. Is it global? Is it just regional? What are we talking about here? And if you're using a tool, you can cut that down to 3 to 4 years.
Okay, Larry, thank you. Anand asked, is there any model optimized for mobile development projects?
Excuse me, I have to turn off my telephone. Not specific model. Again, from what I've seen in my experience, when you're taking on something like a mobile platform, that is just another capability that some organizations in your enterprise want to see you enable. So again, it's just like any other. It's a strategic initiative. It's going to map from a strategic initiative as a driver for a capability to change or to be implemented brand new, and then what is the impact of change to the rest of the domains going forward. So are there specific model types for that? There could be. That's up to you. Again, if you don't see the model type in ArchiMate or TOGAF and System Architect, then we can help you develop that, because you can customize System Architect at the entire meta model, diagrams, definitions, and symbols, to be exactly a perfect fit for you. So again, it's not a model type for mobile devices. That's not really that much different than if you're trying to model a transition from legacy to ERP. Hope that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Ravi asks, does IBM System Architect have capabilities to support dimensional modeling related to data warehousing?
Yes, it's been done, and you're absolutely right. So that's there. It's been done. Sometimes that takes a little bit of an extension based on what you're looking at in terms of your environment and your data modeling, but yes, you can do that in System Architect.
Okay, thank you.
Again, System Architect is not going to take over complete control of information modeling. Again, it's an architecture tool, right? So you want to be, the reason there are data models in enterprise architecture tools is because you want to stay informed of the impact of change in the data space as you roll forward on implementation, not to make it, replace an early one. So keep that in mind.
Thank you. Question from Rennie. Do you model capabilities with ArchiMate? And if yes, why?
Yes, we do. Why is we get asked to constantly. So capability modeling is huge. It's in the industry. If you go out and do a Google on capability modeling in ArchiMate, you're going to get a lot of hits. And you're going to get a lot of hits from the open group members themselves talking about how to do capability modeling. And right now, the popular way is to use the business service definition in ArchiMate to model capabilities. At some point, just from my personal opinion, maybe Simon would be a better resource. The ArchiMate committee will come out with a capability definition or object type. At this point, they have not. They're trying to stay kind of generic in that regard. But join the ArchiMate committee and provide your influence. My recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Question from Andreas. Is it possible to change settings directory for zip, ZIP, that is portable version?
I really don't understand the question at all. Please, why don't you send me an email and I'll get you an answer on that. I'm sorry.
Okay, not to worry. Well, that's got us down to the end of our questions, Larry, so I think this is probably a good time to bring today's event to an end. Are there any final comments you'd like to make yourself?
No, I'd just like to say thank you, Simon, for this opportunity, and thank you all for joining and calling in. I think it's great for the industry that we can get together and have discussions in forums like this. And please, you've got my email address there. Please let us know how we can make this better for you from a presentation perspective at the open group or from a solution perspective and from what we do at Corso. But again, thank you very much.
That's great, Larry, and I'd like to thank you for your time today. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. And just to reiterate, if you'd like a copy of the slides, then please do contact myself, Simon Lofthouse. You will all have an email to all registers, so you'll have my address on there. So feel free to press reply, and I'll assist with getting you a copy of the slides. So at this point, I thank everyone and close today's event. Many thanks.
All right, thank you. Have a good day, everyone.